Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Before watching this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now let's start this video. Coast Guard and International Maritime Law Enforcement. Coast Guard are a multi-role player and provide a variety of services at sea. They are responsible for a wide array of missions, including search and rescue, maritime safety and security, national defense, border control, the protection of sea lanes, the preservation of the marine environment, and law enforcement. The unique nature of Coast Guard as both a law enforcement body and paramilitary force enables them to perform a plan of duties. Their missions and role have expanded to include protecting the sovereignty of states in extant maritime jurisdiction since the adoption of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea or UNCLOS. Under the circumstances, Coast Guard have become the frontline defenders of national interests in maritime disputes. Despite Coast Guard unparalleled responsibilities and service, however, their commitment and devotion don't seem to be as well recognized as they deserve. People are often confusing Coast Guard duties and roles with those of navies. Coast Guard and international maritime law enforcement focuses on two principal subjects: to explore the roles and service of various types of Coast Guard in the world as well as the organizational governance which has evolved to best suit their circumstance, and to examine Coast Guard authority and limitation in law enforcement in relation to international law. Maritime law enforcement examines the provisions of international laws and the cases referred to international tribunals for dispute settlements. It also attempts to provide the criteria for international maritime law enforcement action, in particular, the use of force. Law enforcement to keep the sea safe and peaceful is the Coast Guard overarching mandate. Coast Guard officers are subject to municipal laws and regulations as well as international law when they are engaged in maritime law enforcement on foreigners and foreign vessels. International law, including the UNCLOS, however, does not provide explicit procedures and criteria for maritime law enforcement, inter alia, the use of force. In practice, specific procedures rest with the legislation of states. Under the circumstances, law enforcement on foreign vessels often bring about international disputes over its jurisdiction, legitimacy, jurisdiction, and the extent of the use of force. The use of force is of particular importance since it could result in a serious infringement of human rights, including loss of life, if not properly used law, including the UN clause, however, does not provide explicit procedures and criteria for maritime law enforcement, inter alia, the use of force. In practice, specific procedures rest with the legislation of states. Under the circumstance, law enforcement on foreign vessels often brings about international disputes over its jurisdiction, legitimacy, jurisdiction, and the extent of use of force. The use of force is particularly important since it could result in a serious infringement of human rights, including loss of life, if not properly used. The term Coast Guard may be unfamiliar for many people. Just as police protect their life and property on land, the Coast Guard may be said to do so at sea, while additionally carrying out a role similar to that of naval force. A Coast Guard is a maritime enforcement agency of a particular country. It is a pivotal institution used to ensure maritime safety, security, and law and order at sea. For this purpose, a Coast Guard performs a wide range of duties and service, and therapy is described as an amalgam of diverse maritime service. The origin of the Coast Guard as an idea can trace back to the United Kingdom's Preventative Water Guard, established in 108,009 under the Treasury. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, the United Kingdom had been plagued by smuggling from neighbor countries such as France, Belgium, and Holland, which sought to evade its high tax, primarily in liquors. Additionally, smugglers provided aid to Napoleon during the Napoleonic War. That sparked the British government to strengthen its preventive force, and as a result, a preventive water guard was established. Its primary duty was to prevent smuggling, but it also took responsibility for assisting ships in distress. However, there was redundancy of effort with regard to anti-smuggling forces, which include the riding offices which include the riding office, the preventative water guard, Royal Navy ship, revenue crews, admiralty cruisers, and the coast blockade. In response, the UK in 1822 decided to integrate the preventative service under the Board of Customs and titled it the Coast Guard. The preventative water guard, therefore, is regarded as the immediate ancestor of Her Majesty Coast Guard today. As for the history of the United States Coast Guard, or USCG, its origin dates back to when President Woodrow Wilson signed a bill merging the life-saving and the revenue cutter service in 1915. Just as with the United Kingdom, the USCG began as a means of protecting 10 cutters in the year 1790, then in 1863 became known as the Revenue Cutter Service. The life-saving service was permanently established in 1878. From the example of the United Kingdom and the United States, we learn that revenue-saving service were the original motivator for founding Coast Guard, with growth in maritime trade and a subsequent increase in shipwreck throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. Life-saving increasingly became critical and thus took higher priority in Coast Guard duties. In the United Kingdom, however, it was not until the passage of the Merchant Shipping Act of 1854 that the government took the first formal step to assume direct responsibility for life-saving at sea. There is no universally agreed upon definition of the Coast Guard in international law. The general usage of the word Coast Guard or Coast Guard Agency is used to indicate various types of maritime enforcement agencies. As such, various maritime enforcement agencies, which are tasked primarily with offshore policing and conducting search and rescue operations, and which have the authority to enforce maritime law and regulate maritime activities over civilians and foreigners, are described as a Coast Guard. Maritime enforcement agencies, which are mostly named Coast Guard in English, have their own service name in the respective language. The name indicates the entitled organization's characteristic and the priority of their various missions. The description of a Coast Guard may become more distinctive when compared with the Navy. Relationship between the Coast Guard and the Navy. The Coast Guard appears similar to the Navy, and people sometimes get confused about the differences, but are uniformed, armed, and operate ships, or although Coast Guard ships are described as the white hull as opposite to the gray hull for naval ships. Okay everyone, that's all this article today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until the next one, bye bye.